The history of sex toys is fascinating, stretching back thousands of years and revealing a lot about changing attitudes towards sexuality across cultures. Here's a brief overview on how these items evolved. Ancient times. The prehistoric era. Archaeologists have discovered phallic-shaped objects, some as old as 28,000 years, made from stone, bone, or ivory. These early dildos were likely used for sexual pleasure, fertility rituals, or even symbolizing power and masculinity. Ancient Egypt and Greece. The Egyptians and Greeks both documented the use of rudimentary sex toys. In ancient Greece, bows, early dildos, were crafted from wood or leather and were common enough to be mentioned in plays and art. Sexuality was more openly discussed in these times. The Middle Ages and Renaissance, 5th to 16th century. During the Middle Ages, attitudes towards sex became more conservative in Europe due to the influence of the church. Discussions about sexual pleasure, especially female pleasure, were often repressed, and evidence of sex toys during this time is scarce. However, in parts of Asia, sexual practices were celebrated. Ancient Chinese texts mention jade eggs and other objects designed for sexual pleasure and health, while Kama Sutra from India includes references to using toys to enhance intimacy. The 18th and 19th century, the age of inventions. In the 1700s, the first documented vibrators were developed by doctors in the 18th century to treat hysteria in women. These mechanical devices were used in medical settings under the belief that female sexual frustration led to psychological issues. This practice was the precursor to the personal vibrators of the 20th century. In the late 19th century, the inventions of the electric vibrator in the late 1800s was one of the first electrically powered home appliances marketed as a health device for women. By the early 1900s, vibrators were openly advertised in catalogs and newspapers. The 20th century, the sexual revolution. During the 1940s to 1950s, World War II and the rise of the industrial meant that materials like rubber and plastic became more widely available, leading to the creation of new and improved sex toys. However, most products were still discreetly advertised. Now, the 1960s to the 1970s, the sexual revolution of the 1960s changed everything. As discussions around sexual freedom, women's rights, and liberations grew, so did the demand for openly available sex toys. In 1968, the rabbit vibrator was created in Japan and became a sensation, especially after being featured in pop culture like Sex in the City. In the 1970s, sex shops like Good Vibrations in San Francisco for 1977 and the Pleasure Chest, New York, 1971, opened, offering sex toys in more respectful and empowering environments, emphasizing the importance of pleasure and sexual health. The modern era, mainstream acceptance, 1990s to the 2000s. By 1990, sex toys were becoming less of a taboo, thanks in part to the pop culture like the aforementioned Sex in the City. Most companies started producing sex toys for women with a focus of health and wellness. 2010 to the present, luxury brands like Lilo and Dame emerged, designing sleek, high-tech toys that emphasize aesthetics, quality, and sexual health. With the rise of e-commerce, purchasing sex toys became more accessible and private, further mainstreaming their use.